So let me, just let me tell you how it is. See, from a guy like me, you're looking for sympathy, you look between shit and syphilis, you ain't gonna find it. I put myself here. I got a home. I shouldn't be here, I know it. But you know what? We all put ourselves here. So when you're talking about the homeless, fuck the homeless. I sleep outside in the fucking rain.
I'm not homeless, I sleep in the bush.
I don't know how I get through it, but I sleep in the fucking rain, man.
I've spent a lot of time on the pavement of Whitehorse, digging deep for all the different reasons one can roam these darkened places. I've heard and seen more than I would care to share or admit, and watched as the wanderers scrounged, fed, and shared off each other's hard-earned bounty. The streets wear feathers, constantly shaking. They fall to the ground as others pick them up off the concrete and wear them as decoration on their faces and their lungs.
What's a good thing that happened to you this week?
A good thing? My old man didn't go to jail.
That's a good thing.
So I'm okay. Yeah.
Being in jail, I guess, is definitely not fun. You know, I don't think it's meant to be a punishment. It's meant more to take away your freedom, your privileges, as you are in a position to pay whatever it is you owe to society for whatever you did, I suppose.
I own a house in Carmax, but that is not working out because of a lot of stuff that's going on. So I don't want to go back there. I lost my mom, my dad. So that's mainly why I'm on the street.
Definitely homelessness does have something to do. I mean, when you're homeless, chances are you're likely involved in a lifestyle that will involve drugs or alcohol, stealing or committing crimes, or, you know, maybe selling drugs an individual might resort to acquire money, or all kinds of different things that, you know, are not legal, and you will end up getting caught and you will end up being in trouble at some point. And so it's important to remember that there's always issues and problems underlying what an individual is actually displaying through their behavior.
There's supposed to be more opportunities for the young people to have not only help and shelter, and that's where all the dollars should be spent to. And that's just, I don't see nothing happening. Look, my cousin is in the river, never found him yet.
I've been on the street for, give or take, maybe 2 years. I don't have my kids with me anymore. My kids are in care because I don't have a proper place to stay. There's no stability, I guess.
We deal with all sorts of people, and in even the smallest amount of time that we have to interact with patients, we can create such a massive impact on them, especially in their moment of crisis.
Dealing with social substance abuse issues, there needs to be programs that really reflect on that also, because that's, usually if you're on the streets, addictions and other things are something that you're facing on a daily basis, let alone the lack of employment that goes with that. So,
at the same time, though, there could definitely be a lot more focus on programming, things to help an individual better themselves and be ready for when they get out. There could be more programming, there could be more counseling. They could work with people with cognitive disabilities to try and understand the underlying factors and what it is caused them to end up in such a position.
There should be more opportunities open for them. It doesn't matter if they're drunk, on drugs. We're all human.
The empath in me burns with desire to help these people. Every day I walk past them and share a head nod and a distant memory. Sinking between the spots I've laid my ear to rest, I've heard much of the heartbreak and added what condolences I can. It all becomes a puddled mess with fog that surrounds the true feelings as they erupt outside the Salvation Army or some shady bar. I've seen people wallow in their fears, trying desperately to hide the darkest shadows of behind a cloud of smoke or a fortress of empty beer cans. Not only have I observed these tendencies, I've also done a majority of hiding from my demons in my hometown, born into the cold and night.
The actual courts themselves, do care about an individual in most circumstances and actually want to see an individual strive towards a better future. They'll offer supports, they'll offer different options or point you in the right direction to give you the ball in hand to make the right choices, right, and ask for help in the community. But at WCC, I mean, there's not really much at all that happens, even though they do have the budget and the funding for it, You might have a SAM program, which is a substance abuse management program, but that's only, say, one hour every couple of weeks or something for a small period of time. I mean, it could definitely be more extensive, It should be all day with someone, as a group setting, talking about these things and not just kind of reading through a little pamphlet and then there you go, you're done, right? There could be one-on-one counseling as well. There could be activities, I think, a work program. They used to have an outside work program. I don't know why they don't have one anymore. The Habitat for Humanity used to get them to build roof trusses, and then they would take that then to a construction site. I mean, that's very productive, right? Keep on the right track, keep a routine, do good, Stay away from drugs, stay away from booze, and make good choices.
Just having so few resources, we have really amazing resources here and lots of great work happening, lots of great programmings, but it is different than bigger communities where you have a whole range of shelter options. If you're an LGBTQ youth, we don't have a shelter that's specific for you here. We don't have a youth shelter specific for young women and young men. If you're under 17, you don't have access to emergency shelter. Whereas in other communities, particularly Southern Canadian communities, there's a different range.
But there has to be programs for these young people. At my age, I could see what I've been through. I've seen people get shot. But that's none of my business, but it's got to be these young people that you need to spend the programs on them so they could be well looked after, not from the cold, from right here.
Leader of the third party, first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I, too, as an MLA for downtown Whitehorse, have heard concerns from nearby residents, businesses, and concerned citizens about that a lack of programming and lack of access to the new building during the day leaves individuals with nowhere to go and no meaningful activities to participate in. By now, we would have expected that community organizations and groups would have been invited to actively collaborate with the Salvation Army on a range of services to offer programming, activities, or classes, to name a few. Instead, we hear from neighbours and citizens who see a beautiful new building being underutilized, individuals being required to leave between meals, and scant program. So, Mr. Speaker, what exactly has the Minister done to make sure the Salvation Army is delivering on their commitment to offer meaningful programming as agreed to in the $3 million contract signed by the Minister responsible for Health and Social Services?
Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With respect to the Salvation Army and the agreement, as indicated by the member opposite, we have some commitments, some major commitments. We have some pretty clear concerns raised from the community have been brought to my attention, as well the member opposite, and we're all hearing the concerns that are being brought forward. We are working with the Salvation Army. We will continue to work with our partners to address the concerns that are brought to our attention. We've looked at the contribution agreement, and we have some, obviously some terms within the agreement that gives us the flexibility, and that's what we're working with. If for some reason that the agreement is not, the commitments are not met, then we have some obligations there as well to ensure that Yukoners are given the best possible service. The Salvation Army, as it was designed and built by the previous government, was there, and we have one shelter in the city, and we cannot afford two shelters. So we really have to work hard with our stakeholders to make it as efficient and as effective as possible. And certainly we're having our a bit of growing pains there, and we'll continue to work with our partners and look at reducing some of the concerns that are brought to our attention. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I think the street people are doing way better than Salvation Army. You go there, eat, yeah, sure, but for the care, and they don't care about you. They just say, here, go.
The street people help each other out.
Yes, of course.
Kind of like a family.
Yes.
Take care of each other.
And that's how I find it lately, yes. Because I see all my friends all over the place.
The housing struggle alone at Whitehorse is enough to feel like a stranglehold if you don't have the proper safety nets in place to catch you when you slip between months. As winter approaches, I see the stress etched in the faces of those moving around me in brisk fashion, steady trying to accumulate what they can for the creeping silence. The layers quake. You can see the classes as they walk past in either upright brick ignorance or mock empathy. I would never blame people for the mind states they are in, or how a human can lack what values it takes to keep oneself healthy and happy. It is a good place to be, a warm place, like the walls of a home.
As you know, the Department of Health and Social Services and the Salvation Army have been working in partnership for the past year to support the operations at the Center of Hope here in Whitehorse. While this partnership has had its successes, both parties have recognized for some time that the services provided at the center are not meeting either of our hopes or expectations. We have come to the conclusion that the programming currently offered is not meeting the important needs of our citizens. We have worked with the Salvation Army to transfer ownership of the building and its operations to the Yukon government on January 31st, 2019. The Salvation Army will continue to do its valuable work in the community, but it will focus on other types of services and supports. After January 31st, Health and Social Services will have oversight of services and programs and the operations. I want to assure Yukoners, especially those who are currently dependent on the services offered by the center, that their access to services will continue. Moving forward, we will work collaboratively with our partners to develop a comprehensive set of and suite of services that will provide the needed support for all of our citizens in our community. These partners have expressed concerns to us, and we hope that we will now work collaboratively with all of our partners in the community to redesign the shelter services.
We are very committed from the Salvation Army's perspective of making this a smooth transition. We have information and systems and operational policies and all those things in place that the Salvation Army has developed over 100 years of running shelters in Canada. There are many things that we can contribute to assist as the government begins to take over this process. So we're more than willing to be a part of that conversation, to share our policies, to share the things that we have learned in 100 years of sheltering across Canada.
Safe at Home is very broad in its actions. It doesn't target any one subpopulation. It really tries to integrate everybody in one, with an acknowledgement that there are specific actions that pertain to specific subpopulations. There is an acknowledgement of the disproportionate representation of Indigenous people in homelessness, and So if you look throughout all of those priority areas and the goals and the key actions identified, under housing stock, there are some key actions that relate specifically to youth, particularly pregnant youth. Largely where my opinion is where youth comes into it is really prevention. Of the individuals who identified as homeless, their first experience of homelessness was under the age of 19. So there's a direct, and we know this from national research, there's a direct trajectory from like the younger you are when you first experience your homelessness, the more likely you are to continue on that path. And that's not an individual blame thing, that's just because you start to become more socially isolated, you attach yourself to a different type of community, which might be people who are homeless. Not to say that people who are homeless are bad people, but that's just starts to be what you resonate. You go into survival mode, and that's sort of all that you know. From my opinion, prevention and the actions within there are really about working with youth transitioning out of care, working with families to strengthen the capacity of families to continue to stay together if that's a good fit. By the same token, if youth need to live independently, I have a firm belief that we don't give youth enough credit to be able to, take care of themselves and know what's best for themselves. And so to be able to support that and to have different conversations about youth being in housing earlier than we typically think is good or is viable or whatever is going to work. And a lot of other communities, and I think it would be great if we could have an overlay tour plan or sort of a sister plan to end youth homelessness in Whitehorse or in Yukon, with really youth-driven actions and solutions that could really complement Safe at Home and be more explicit about what youth need. And then you could bring in Department of Education and Youth Justice and Family and Children's Services and all of those Indigenous communities and all of the amazing youth organizations here to have a really structured conversation around and put timelines and targets and be really clear about. And we don't need to reinvent the wheel. I mean, other communities have written plans to end homelessness for youth, and we just have to put the northern solutions to it. And I think like having the lived experience around the table will really drive things forward, as it has for the overarching plan. I mean, we've had people with lived experience around the table since day one.
We're small enough, even though we're growing in size of a community, but at the end of the day, I believe it's based on partnerships. The agreements allow us as First Nations to really play a more pivotal role, especially when it comes to community development. It really is a government to government to government, and including municipalities. So there's 4 levels of government that need to be in the same room discussing the same issues. A lot of our people, as First Nation people, are high numbers in regards to that reality, and unfortunately that comes out of certain things such as the residential school. The social dysfunction that has been caused by those policies that have really suppressed our people from many different aspects. There's also the judicial side of it, which is something that when it comes to the court systems and the lack of flexibility and a lot of the realities that those people face on a day-to-day basis leads them to come back into these places where homelessness is obviously a very big part of their life.
To the youth that are out there, struggling or falling down the wrong path at a tumultuous speed, I'd say, you got to think twice, because certain actions or decisions you make that might affect you on the short term can also lead to long-term effects. Like I'm currently living at a halfway house, and every day my worry is, the slightest mistake I can make could land me back in jail, and I'll be right back to square one, right? While you're in jail, all you can usually think about is getting out, getting out and making all these changes. And it's tough to actually put them into practice once you do get out, because you're faced with the same reality as before. When you go to jail, you get a place to stay, you get 3 square meals a day, you can do a little exercise, you can socialize with other people that are there, So it's kind of nice in a sense, but at the same time, I'd rather be homeless than be in jail. I think going to jail is definitely a big change, but at the same time it still does kind of feel like you're homeless, because if you don't have a home to go to when you get out, or somebody that could, you know, bail you out or be your surety and provide you with supports, you know, a place where you're staying, positive environment where you can afford food, clothing, all those necessities, I mean, you're still going to be looking at the same thing. And once you're a part of the system, I think it's really hard to get out, and especially if you're homeless. So when you get out, you know, it's right back into the same routine, you know, or you got to completely cut all ties and reach out and ask for help. Otherwise, you're going to be repeating the same mistakes, you know.
Some officers are very nice and actually want to work with you because just the fact they're concerned about their community, right? While there's some officers that seem that, you know, they come from the big city, so they treat it like a big city, you know, and that's interactions that are extremely negative. And while there's other officers, you know, it's just like, oh, hey, all right, yeah, how you doing today, Mr. Burnett? You know, have you been drinking or this and that? What are your conditions? Are you abiding by your conditions? You know, just a little checkup. Everything's good? All right, you take care of yourself, right? Good to see you're doing well. And that's what I would categorize as a positive police interaction, you know? There's no hard feelings. Nobody, you just carry on with your day afterwards, right? EMT services, I don't know, because I've never called an ambulance.
There are differences when we're interacting with homeless as opposed to housed individuals. However, our approach to patient care is fairly universal. We determine their needs and we try to facilitate based on their needs. Often we are called for homeless individuals who are simply sleeping, whether it be in a park or in an alleyway, and really it's our job to try to help be an advocate for them to find out the best plan of action for them. They're lacking the basic need, which is shelter, and especially in the winter months, it's really hard to just remove yourself from that being your issue in those 20 minutes that we deal with them. So it's very important to educate them on processes like the Salvation Army and what time they close, whether it be taking them to alcohol and drug services to have detox, if that is the case for them, or looking at First Nations Health as finding an alternative solution for them. When a guideline comes into place or it's introduced as a process, it generally is universal to patient care all around. But for instance, the introduction of taking patients to alcohol and drug services, that was introduced, and I do personally find that it does gear more towards the homeless demographic, because there is a higher acuity for drug and alcohol addiction to happen. There just happens to be observed an increase in depression and a more of a demand on a system because these individuals, they don't have shelter. With homeless individuals, they're often being called for cuts and bruises, alcohol or substance abuse, and a lot of them are not in the right state of mind or have the capacity to understand their situations fully. So it's very important that with our job, we take that time and energy to make sure they understand, and if taking them to the hospital is a safe plan for them for that evening, then we need to do our best to try to get that done. Being that homelessness affects everybody, and we do have a large First Nations demographic up here, it is very important that we let our patients know, especially those that are First Nations, that we have First Nations Health, and there are resources that they can use once they get to the hospital.
People in the community are generally very helpful, and people are always willing to lend a helping hand. There's lots of supports out there. People just have to reach out and ask. I've seen people all the time, you know, buy someone a coffee or a sandwich, or, you know, people donate things to the food bank. The food bank's always open. There's food at Salvation Army. There's all kinds of nonprofit organizations all over that help out with clothes, you know, for the winter. There's lots of supports out there. You just have to reach out and ask for help, you know.
I would like to just say that I think what you guys are doing is proper and to the point, and I hope this gets out to people that they would try and see how life is and walk in our shoes and do it properly and without prejudice.
There is another place we fall into the human condition, which brings me to what I think breeds the homeless mentality, and the place most of the fear is born: desperation. It feeds on our souls slowly like cocaine and a diminishing serotonin level. It is beyond stress. It is looking into the void and not knowing what to do but laugh, in a way you have never laughed. It's a crooked, desperate laugh, piercing into the past and future. Dispelling this feeling is near impossible without time and conditioning. Not to say it is a hopeless affair, but the damage takes time to heal. Adequate self-care is the only way over time. Needless to say, I would not wish the homeless or street mentality on anyone, whether it's being too drunk to go home or not having a home or just rubbing fabric for a few days waiting for a check.